So let's say this is from the anterior part of the midbrain. We are taking the picture from the anterior side, the ventral side of the brainstem, correct? And we'll be also looking at the lateral side of the brainstem. So first of all, I'm going to draw a picture according to the ventral side of the brainstem. So this is your midbrain, and below to this, my dear friends, so there is a structure, a broad structure, very broad structure, that is pons. My dear friends, this is pons. So midbrain is mesencephalon, pons is the part of hindbrain, and below to the pons there is a structure going down. It's a kind of convergence now, structure going down, and this structure is your medulla oblongata. This structure is medulla oblongata. Correct, my dear friends? So this is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. There is a structure behind the brainstem. Okay, that is very important for coordination in the body. So when we talk about coordination in the body, there is a very important structure that is found behind the brainstem, and that is also known as little brain. So that structure is known as cerebellum. That is behind the pons. That is behind the brainstem, but primarily behind the pons. This structure is cerebellum. Midbrain is mesencephalon and hindbrain is rhombencephalon. Rhombencephalon is further divided into myelencephalon and metencephalon. So this pons and cerebellum, this is cerebellum. This is the entire structure behind the brainstem. It's like this. Cerebellum. This is also known as cerebellum. And from the anterior view, here is a brainstem. This is the cerebellum. You are going to see these two parts in this diagram. So this is cerebellum. Pons and cerebellum together is the part of hindbrain, that is also known as metencephalon. And medulla oblongata, this structure, medulla oblongata, is also known as myelencephalon. Myelencephalon. So my dear friends, at least you are now being aware of some nomenclature of central nervous system. So there is a lot of things to talk about in central nervous system, and let's move on. Let's move forward and try and understand those things. My dear friends, in this diagram itself, you have seen that there is three things in brainstem, that is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Now let us move in a new diagram from the lateral view. So from the lateral view, if you see, this is your midbrain. There is a bulge here, that is the bulge of pons, that is bulge in the anteriorly, but posteriorly it's a kind of flat. And there is a little bulge of medulla oblongata. Okay, so this is from the lateral view. So this is the anterior side, and this is the posterior side of the brainstem. As I said, in the posterior side there is cerebellum. So my dear friends, let me draw cerebellum here. So this is cerebellum. That is behind the brainstem. So let me give name of them again. this is midbrain, this is pons, and this is medulla oblongata, and this is your cerebellum, and this entire structure is hindbrain, and that is rhombencephalon. So this entire structure is rhombencephalon, and this is midbrain, this is mesencephalon. I hope you are able to understand till now. And now what I am going to tell you is the structure of the brain, that is your forebrain, that is prosencephalon. Let me tell you, when we talk about brain, again we need to understand brain at least in 3 patterns. First of all, we will see the lateral view. My dear friends, when we talk about brain, let me tell you that brain is going to be divided by some grooves and sulci. So what we are talking right now is forebrain. That is prosencephalon. And my dear friends, if you see this structure, this is the lateral view of brain, and this part, this is anterior and this is posterior, and we are looking this structure from the lateral side. So we are looking this structure from the lateral side. So lateral side is something that is away from the midline. So this is the lateral view. So you need to know a bit about the language of anatomy. I will put a separate lecture for language of anatomy, and I hope that will also help you in understanding the anatomy very basic. So first of all, let us try and understand. This is the lateral view, and you would be able to see there is midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, correct, and behind there is your cerebellum. When we talk about forebrain from the lateral view, there is 2 important things that you should always look into. There is something called as this groove, and this is known as lateral sulcus. This is known as lateral sulcus. This groove in the brain is lateral sulcus. And my dear friends, there is another groove somewhere at this point, and this groove is very famous, very important to know. This groove is also known as, yes my dear, please, this is central sulcus. So this is central sulcus and this is lateral sulcus. Anterior to the central sulcus is your frontal lobe. Anterior to the central sulcus is your frontal lobe. So brain is having some depressions known as sulcus, and brain is having some ridges known as gyri. So there are 2 very prominent sulcus, and that is very clearly visible from the lateral side. One is very deep and very prominent, that is known as lateral sulcus, and another that is there which is known as central sulcus. And posterior to the central sulcus is your parietal lobe. Parietal lobe. Below the lateral sulcus, this structure here is your temporal lobe. Temporal lobe. This posteriorly, there is something known as very important area of the brain, that is known as occipital lobe. That is known as occipital lobe. So this occipital lobe is very important for your vision. This occipital lobe, the cortex in the occipital lobe is also known as visual cortex. So my dear friends, what we have just learned, that there is something known as, number 1, there is something known as frontal lobe. Number 2, there is something known as parietal lobe. Number 3, there is something known as temporal lobe. And number 4, there is something known as occipital lobe.